Hey guys, before the episode starts, this first story, I forgot to mention it in the first part of the episode, but this first story is from a very close family member of mine, and this is a spook life story. I appreciate you guys listening in, and enjoy.
So my spooklight story is one that happened over there in Tahlequah, over there by the sewer plant. I guess it was in high school sometime when we were just kind of hanging out the dirt road. A friend of mine and we were parked there and noticed some lights came up from behind us. So, you know, thought we'd better move along. So we started the car up, took off a little bit, and noticed that there was no lights. So we kind of drove back further down the road, and same thing. So, as we started it up again, looked over to the left, and these lights were doing like the squiggly motion up in the trees, and figured it was time to get out. That's my spook light story. Well, one of them. Thanks.
Hello, my name is Dono. I'm from Ontario, Canada, and I'd like to share two creepy stories with you. Thank you to Yehola for asking me to send in some stories. So this was back in 2005. Me and my old friend, she wanted to take pictures of her baby, like in the fall leaves. So this was around, I think it was October. Yeah, it was around October anyways. And so we went down and we were looking for places to take pictures, and I was looking around with the camera because I like to do photography as well. So I was looking, and this is where our powwow grounds are. So there is an arbor, and it's right in the middle of the park where we have our powwows. And I was looking through the camera, and I could see these like colors. They look like flags, like almost. I thought they were flags, so I looked, took the camera away, looked, there was nothing there. I put the camera back, and I could still see all these colors in the middle of that arbor. So I asked my friend to come over and take a look in the camera, and they could see it. And then I said, well, can you see it without it? And they said no. So I kept looking at it, and we'd tried to take pictures of it, but they wouldn't register. But we did get a video of it. Unfortunately, we don't have the video anymore. I don't know what happened to it, if it was saved or not, but I haven't. I should ask for it and see. But anyways, I kind of moved around because there are like benches you can sit on. And they're metal, so I thought maybe it was like sun glare or something, but everywhere I'd move I'd see them, but they were right in the middle of the arbor. Looked like they were dancing. There was like pink, purple, yellow, green, blue, red, like all these colors, and they were all moving in a circle, clockwise direction, right in the middle of the arbor. So that was kind of creeped me out, but it was actually kind of nice as well. I wouldn't recommend doing that at a powwow ground, but we weren't looking for it, so I wouldn't do it again though. But yeah, so that's the first story. My second one is with the same friend. We used to like getting creeped out, and this was probably in the early 2000s. It was before she had her first baby anyways. So we were driving around. We used to like to go into cemeteries. Like there's ones you can drive around in Peterborough, Ontario. So that's in Canada as well. So we looked at this one, and I didn't like it. I don't know, I got obviously a creepy feeling, but so we went down to this other one, and you could drive through it and drive through the paths, and it had just snowed a little bit, so there was like a fresh powder of snow. So we were driving along, and all of a sudden we seen these little footprints, and they're like, I don't know, maybe 1 or 2 year old, like toddler footprints, and they look like, I don't know, like those old-fashioned white shoes, I guess you would call them, the ones with the laces, the flat flat soles, but there was a bunch of those little footprints. And then we went to this other direction, but there were all of these paths. I was gonna get out and take a picture, but no, nope, it didn't do it. I was too creeped out. And anyways, sorry about that. Anyways, we were driving along, and then all of a sudden we see these little fingerprints, like little digging in the snow on some of these graves, and we're like, okay, we gotta get out of here. So we're trying to get out, and there's a bunch of different gates you can get out, but they were all locked. So unfortunately, we had to go through all of the cemetery, but it's our own fault for looking for a scare. But yeah, that we were young and pretty, we were just ignorant. We didn't think we would see anything, but we did. And those little fingerprints it was really sad actually to even see that, and those little footprints. Like there was no big footprints, like, of a parent or somebody with their kid, and it was nighttime as well. So yeah, we seen that, and and those dancers in the powwow grounds is what I believe the first story was. But yeah, thank you for listening, and see you later.
Incy Wincy Spider went up the water spout. Down came the rain and washed the spider out. Out came the sun and dried up all the rain. So Incy Wincy Spider went up the spout again. Incy Wincy Spider went up the water spout. Down came the rain and washed the spider out. Out came the sun and dried up all the rain. So Incy Wincy Spider went up the spout again.
What's going on, guys, and welcome to the 36th rendition of the Warcry Podcast. I'm your host, and this episode is the third part of This Is Creepy. I appreciate everyone that sent their stories in. The first story that you just heard was from Dono. He hosts a podcast called Rest Scares. If you haven't had a chance, I've mentioned him on the live this past week, this past week, or weekend, whatever you want to call it. Go give him a follow. Go listen to his stories. I've mentioned him a few times on the pod, but he sent in 2 stories. And man, something about, little kids in a cemetery, and, you just, it creeps me out every time. But I appreciate him sending in those 2 stories, and let's get the show on the road. Alrighty, first story, and this is kind of multiple stories, and this gentleman would like to remain anonymous, if I can say it. But his stories go, so good day. I have some stories, quite a few actually. I could tell stories all night. There's some I heard growing up, and some I've experienced. I'm Cheyenne and Arapaho, and I'm from Oklahoma, but I currently live in Alberta, Canada. And I've had experiences with spirits and cryptids. My brother and I once seen a troll-like being. We seen it in our Grammy's house. The homes that she had lived in had spirits in them as well. So we pretty much grew up around that stuff. From hearing the voices to hearing things being moved around, seen people and heard a piano playing in an empty church. Got followed by ghost cars a few times at a house we lived in. I heard voices and music playing in the basement. It was just my daughters and I home at the time. They were sleeping and I was up. I just sat and listened to them until I went to sleep. My oldest daughter had seen the Hat Man, and he had been bothering her for quite some time. He used to stand in the corner of her room and watch her sleep. When I was a small child, I remember having imaginary friends, but I think that they were spirits. Because my mom looked out the window and seen some kids playing on the swing set with me. When she went out to meet my friends, I was alone. She also said I was playing like there were other kids with me. When I used to work at Lucky Star Casino in Concho, yes, the same place that had the Bigfoot happenings. I have seen the pictures, and I have also seen the surveillance video. And yes, if you're wondering, it was huge. They say the tape was destroyed, but I know a few people who made copies for themselves. The tribe put a lid on the whole thing, but I know what happened. One time, I worked a double shift, and at around 5 in the morning, something big was seen just west of the casino. I heard a few whoops, and I waited until daylight to check out the area. There were buffalo in the field, so I waited a little bit longer for them to clear out, and when I went down to the area, there was a mulberry tree, and the buffalo laid underneath it. I checked around and seen that branches had been stripped of leaves and mulberries. And I'm talking about 10 to 12 feet off the ground. Now I'm about 6'2", and I couldn't reach those stripped branches. And I had heard some howls and whoops up there as well. We live in prime Bigfoot territory. Have yet to see one though. Seen a little handprint in the dust on my truck. I was told it was a raccoon, but there are none here. There's supposedly a village of LP along the river near our home. Just the other night, the wind chimed, and our front door chimed. The front door was shut. There was nobody in the living room and nobody in the house. I have so many other stories. I'm thinking of writing them down because as I get older, it's getting harder to remember them. As I do, it gives me something to do and helps me remember the best as I can of all the stuff I've heard and that I've experienced. Thank you for your time. Keep up the good work. I enjoy listening to the podcast, and have a good night, sir. You know, I appreciate that, man. There's so many different things that we deal with just as a Native people, and he named literally every single thing that we kind of deal with and you know, things that we encounter. And you know, I just thought I appreciate this gentleman sharing the stories. He has a few other ones, and now this is kind of a question really, but he was talking about a road that's west of Anadarko called Caddo Road or Caddo Road, and he said that basically he's heard a lot of people say that there's something or someone out there, and they don't really talk about it in detail, but they always get freaked out, whatever it is. And if you're out in that Darko area, you know, let me know if you heard anything out there by Caddo Road. Caddo, jeez. You know, that's you know, another kind of story that he mentioned, that there was a Bigfoot that was roaming around outside of Riverside High School or Riverside Schools. That's just north of that casino, and he mentioned that people had seen or had similar stories, kind of to the one at the casino. And the final kind of thing that he talked about when we were having our conversation, that he believes that there are multiple witches that live out on certain roads, and I'm not going to name the roads, but he knew a guy that lived across the highway from one, and he said that her medicine was too strong. That's pretty interesting. I appreciate you, sir, for sharing those stories and also a little bit of information about that Concho area and that Bigfoot. I know people, man, that is like the topic. I've heard multiple people, and I've had now 4 people tell me that they have seen the video, and so I think it's out there still. Maybe one day I'll get to see it. But I appreciate you sending in those stories. Moving on to the next set of stories here. Now, these stories, I was told that they are with the utmost importance, and this, like I said, once again, anonymous. But this comes out of around my stomping grounds and around where I'm from and kind of the area. But this must remain anonymous. Please do not say my name or the name of the hospital, but it is a IHS hospital. My wife is My wife is a ICU nurse at this hospital. She works overnight, Often, patients will talk about kids laughing and playing. They ask who these kids are, and the staff have to explain that there are no kids in the ICU. They will specifically describe a young boy, 8 to 9 years old, shorts with a button-up t-shirt and a classic hairstyle, like a young schoolboy. The patients that see the boy, they always pass away. Any patient that describes the boy dies soon after. They all describe the same boy. There's only been one nurse that has seen the boy, and they saw him going down the back stairwell late at night. As of right now, the nurse is still alive. The next story from this gentleman. My uncle was traveling a dirt road in an older car. It was a very rural area. As he topped a hill, the car suddenly died. The headlights were on, but they were very dim, as it was a 40s model, or at best an early 50s. Out of the thick brush on the left-hand side of the road, just in front of a car, a wolf-like head appeared. It was very large. As the wolf's head emerged from the brush, it slowly turned its head towards the car. Then the rest of the creature began to emerge. The shoulders started to appear, but they were not that of a wolf. They were shoulders of a man, and the beast was walking upright. As the rest of the beast made its way out of the bush, the head of the wolf, but the rest was human, and it was naked. It dropped to all fours and started slowly moving across the road. As it moved across the road, more and more of the creature started turning into a wolf. And by the time it was in the brush on the other side of the road, the transformation was almost complete. While it was crossing the car, it would not start. Once it was no longer in sight, the car started, and my uncle drove away as fast as possible. He said that the creature's medicine prevented the car from starting. And this story is out of Porham in Webbers Falls, Oklahoma. Man, I got goosebumps on that one. Golly. I got major goosebumps. Those are some great stories, and man, wow. I appreciate those stories. That's a lot of things that people don't really see them hardly anymore. I know the internet is always saying, oh, there's a skinwalker on the side of the road. And, I have a hard time, believing this. But I appreciate those stories. Those are very powerful stories. And I've got goosebumps on both. Now, this story definitely hits close to home. This story comes from a family member of mine, and this is out of Merle Park in Tahlequah, or Park Hill. I was out at Merle Park, and there was about 4 or 5 of us in total. We were out at the park, and there's a parking lot that when you pull in, it's a kind of a parking lot with no spaces. It's just a big area that has a concrete area. And there's these 2 big trees. And this was real late at night. But we decided to climb these trees and mess around and doing what young people do. The cops get called. So 2 county cops show up and they're spotlighting the area. They get out and they're looking, and we're trying to be as quiet as humanly possible while they are talking and searching for us. They eventually leave. So we wait for a little bit. The coast is clear. Everything is normal now. And we climb down. And we were sitting there talking. And all of a sudden, we hear this sound. And then a crash. Something threw a trash can. We all took off running, not looking back. But as we got closer to the Merle home, to the actual home, we all kind of sat there and wondered, what was that? These trash cans, that are being spoke about are very heavy trash cans. And so that story was out of Merle Home. You know, eventually I'm going to tell my Merle Home story that I think it might be the same creature. And I asked my family member what they thought it was, and, you know, kind of hindsight, and they think it was probably Bigfoot or, you know, some type of being that is there, that lives there. But I appreciate my family member for sharing that story. These next set of stories, I got a message from Mr. Jared Davis. He cooks the best hog meat in Cherokee County. I would say probably up there in Oklahoma, probably top 3 maybe. Got to give him his props. But he sent me a message and he said, "Man, you didn't even tell my good stories." So these stories are from Mr. Jared Davis. He's out of Locust Grove area. But here's his stories. When we were young, we used to play hide and seek in our neighborhood. And we would break up into teams. Well, one night, we couldn't find our friends at all. So we just went home, and we got our pit bulls, and we went out to look again. And as we were walking down the dirt road, we heard something running at us, and our dogs started to bark in that direction. And the next thing we see is our friends running towards us. Keep in mind, it is a dirt road, and one of them had taken their shoes off and was running barefoot at a full sprint down this road. We seen the fright on their faces, and we asked, "What is it? What is it?" They said, "Let's go back home. We got to get back." And when we got home, they said they seen a woman in an old Western-style dress coming towards them, and she was floating about 3 feet off the ground with what looked like to be a book in her hand, and she was reading. One night, when I was a younger man, a younger guy, we were coming back from a revival in Tahlequah, on Highway 82 north of Tahlequah. We were with our grandparents in an old station wagon by Blackbird Creek Bridge. My grandparents were talking Cherokee to each other, and the tone got a little bit different. And as a young guy, I noticed, so I stopped playing, with what I was doing, and looked ahead and noticed a small creature that resembled a golem on the rail next to in the road, like one of those Lord of the Rings type golems. And for a vivid second, it jumped off the rail into wherever the bridge passed over. The bridge was 20 feet high. The thing we saw was never spoken of again, but I can recall that day and the sight of it to this very day. My uncle told one of his uncles as a child about him sitting in their old house by a spring where LP would gather water. He would say that one day he just happened to look out the window and seen an LP sitting by the water, motioning him to come and speaking to him in Cherokee, as if he were standing right there in front of him. He could hear him, plain as day. So he climbs out the window and goes towards the LP. And as he got closer, he noticed that he was further into the woods, but was still telling him to come on and follow him. He said this happened a few times until they came to a solid rock wall on a hillside, and the LP turns and faces the wall and spoke to it, and the wall split apart, and the LP walks in and tells him to come in. When inside, he noticed a whole family of them. The LP told him to sit as he went for the chair, and he noticed that the seating part was all copperheads. And the LP said, "Sit, they won't hurt you." He said they sit and they talked for a while, and the LP told him that he should probably get home and to not speak about what he seen. And for a number of years he didn't say anything. It was a long time before he said anything, because if he did, bad things would happen. The LP then walked him back to the rock, repeated the phrase from earlier, and the rock slid open again, and they said their goodbyes. And I think, if I recall correctly, when he returned home, it was 1 or 2 days later. from when he first left. My brother said that he had seen one watching us play Cherokee marbles in our front yard. We had 2 light sources from our front porch, and there was a light on the pole. We would play almost just about every night, as it is a game that I still love to play to this day. We had been playing for quite some time, and my little brother's marble got hid away, and as he was walking towards it, all of a sudden came running back in fright. Couldn't say what it was as he was running back to the house, but we could see the fright on his face, so we ran behind him to get in the house. When asked, he wouldn't say what it was that he seen, until some time later, when he said that he saw a little man and he was peeking around a tree watching us play marbles. Wow. Yeah, Mr. Jared Davis got those LP stories on lock, and I appreciate him sharing, these stories, because man, I mean, these are some. I got some goosebumps, man. I definitely got some goosebumps on those, and I appreciate him sharing those stories. He's got one more that I'm gonna save for a later date. It's about him and him growing up in this creepy house. But Jared, I appreciate you sharing those stories, and keep them coming, man. I appreciate you. Man, guys, if you guys aren't spooked out by some of these things, if I can talk. If you guys are not spooked out by these stories yet, I got one coming. I got one of these coming from Haskell University, and it comes from Miss Chastity Cadu, and she is Potawatomi from the Prairie Band Potawatomi Reservation in Kansas. And her story is, back in 2005, I began the fall semester at Haskell Indian Nations University in Lawrence, Kansas. The girls' freshman dorm is called Pocahontas Hall, better known as Pokey. There are many stories I have heard from Pokey. People would say that this dorm is the most haunted dorm of all dorms at Haskell, and everyone had a story about it. One day, I came back to my dorm room, which was a large dorm room located in the back right wing of the dorms. Supper was over, and everybody was winding down. My roommate and I had an extra bed in our room where our friends would sometimes crash when they would come to visit us. I laid on this bed and began to watch a movie with my roommate. All of a sudden, my body felt stiff. My chest felt heavy. And it felt like someone was pressing down on my body. I could not move, I could not turn my head, and I couldn't even speak. All I could do was lay there and try to scream, but I couldn't. This went on for 10 minutes, and I finally felt the pressure off my chest, and I sat up and turned to my roommate, and she had no idea of what was happening to me or the state that I was in. She looked confused as I sat there and cried. The day I knew there were spirits in that Pocahontas Hall. So my coworkers and I decided to smudge our room and be careful with who we invited over. Another time, while dorming at the OK Hall during the summer, my roommate and I were asleep one night and heard a ball bouncing in our room. We turned the light on and we see her basketball in the middle of our room, which was crazy because she kept it in the closet with the doors closed. The next day we told our dorm matrons about it, and they told us a story how Haskell used to be a boarding school back in 1884, and many native children perished here, leaving behind their tiny spirits. There is even a cemetery on campus where children are buried. She said that they love playing with toys and to keep our things put away and not to bring it with us and keep it at home. That night we heard no noises, but the next morning my roommate and I woke up to our stuffed toys and other items in a small circle on the floor. We had to smudge our room shortly after that. Wow. Man, yeah, I know we just talked about, in the last live stream, I went into a more detailed talk about, boarding schools and residential schools, and, this story is fitting. It's just crazy, the amount of energy that could be in a place, that has had young children, perish, and killed and whatnot. And I appreciate you sharing those two stories. Haskell has been notoriously known for being maybe the most haunted college ever. I may say it's up there top 3. But there's a lot of stuff going on out there, and I appreciate you sharing, Chastity. I appreciate you sharing that story, and let's get on to the next one. And now this will be the last story for This Is Creepy Part 3, and it's a good one. My name is Hawk John, and I am Kushata from Kinder, Louisiana. And this story is from when I was a kid. Now I'll give you a little background info that will help you understand some details. My parents were married at one time but got divorced when I was a baby. My parents were two very different people, raised two very different ways. My dad was extremely 1,000% traditional in the native ways of his upbringing, of my brother and I. The language, the do's and don'ts. My mom's family was raised 1,000% very strictly Christian. The talking in tongues, the girls with long hair, no makeup, dress wearing, holy rolling kind of people. They were so strict and they didn't celebrate holidays. So when the holidays would come, we would go to Texas to our grandparents on our dad's side, and so would the rest of our family. So when it was time for us to go to Texas for the holidays, sometimes my mom would meet my grandparents or my uncle at this truck stop on the border of Texas and Louisiana that sold food, and it was in Maryville, Louisiana. It had pizzas, burgers, those types of truck stops. So one time, going home from Christmas/New Year's holiday from Texas, my uncle had me and my brother and my cousins, and we stopped at the Maryville truck stop to get food. Nobody was meeting us. He was just taking us the full trip all the way home. We got food, and I noticed that he got a little bit extra. The food part wasn't too noticeable, but I noticed that he got an extra drink, and that he kept it safe, like he didn't want anything to happen to it. Now I think the highway is Highway 110 between Maryville, and I think the next town would be Singer in Louisiana, just across the border. It's a straight shot. Very smooth road, no bumps, no hard turns, no potholes, really anything. But there is a tiny little bridge that's about 10 to 15 foot long, covering a dried up creek bed. And as we got closer to it, we slowed down, and he pulled over. And he stopped right before the crossing, and my uncle grabbed the food and the drink, and he set it at a small cross next to the road. He said a couple of things and got back and put his seatbelt on and started driving like nothing happened. Of course, us being young guys, young kids, we were scratching our heads and was like, why did he do that? What is he doing? And we were always taught not to question something like that, but I had to know, and was the only one who had enough courage. So I asked him, why did you do that? He paused and he said, I'll tell you when we park. So later on, we get back to my mom's. He comes in and visits with her, my stepdad, and us for a while. He gets up to leave, and he helps us get our suitcases and stuff, and started telling us bye, and that he loved us. And I said, hey, you remember earlier you said you would tell me why you left that food on the side of the road when we parked? He paused, and he goes, okay. Last holiday, when you guys were off to school, or when you guys were off of school, I was on my way down here to come get y'all, and I was driving by that spot, and there was a man sitting there on the ground. It was really, really cold outside that day, and it was raining, and he was soaked from head to toe with his head down, and he didn't look as I passed. As soon as I passed, something did not feel right, and I kept feeling like I should have at least stopped and talked to him, give him some food or a blanket or something to help him out, but I didn't. So I just kept going so I could pick y'all up and bring y'all back to Texas. So when the holiday was over, I brought you guys back. I brought you guys back, and I was headed back. And I had some leftover food from the truck stop in Maryville that I had sitting on the dashboard. And I put my drink carrier with my drink, up there. And I was coming up to that spot. It was quiet. I had no music on, nothing. I was just driving. And straight out of nowhere, that food, along with the drink and the towel, flew and slammed into the passenger side window with force. It didn't slip off or fall straight down like it normally would. It was as if someone grabbed the towel and pulled it hard, and it was like it was coming straight into the window. And the drink hit so hard that it exploded. The lid fell off, popped off, splashed all over the place. And I slammed my brakes and stopped because it made me jump. I knew what happened wasn't normal. Then I realized where I was and remembered the man sitting there cold and wet with his head down, and realized that was the exact same spot that I had seen him. And there was a cross there that wasn't there before. I took it as a spirit of that man. He was upset with me because I didn't stop that day. So every time I pass by, I stop. I drop off some food, even a towel sometimes, as a way of saying sorry to that man for not stopping and leaving a gift there for him. And every time from that on, until my grandpa passed away and my grandmother and uncle moved away from that part of Texas, he did the same thing. Always stopped and left some food and a drink, and sometimes even a towel. I even remember him leaving a blanket once. Man, that's so crazy. I wonder if, it's like residual energy, and that, like I said, I mentioned before with the Haskell stories. It's so crazy that there's things out there that we can't see, and they're always around us, and they're always enveloped. There's always something that pushes it forward and makes things move, and gives us, like I said, life, and it's crazy, that sometimes science and them kind of just disregard, things we can't explain, and I appreciate that story, and like I said, these stories have been so these were some heavy hitters. Like I really sat back when I was reading some of these stories and really thought about different things, and I mentioned on the live stream that I often think about what it would be like if we know the kids that had perished from residential schools, or for instance in this last story, if he had stopped by and helped that man out, things could be different. And that's a what if game that I often think, and that's just kind of my way of my mind racing and thinking about those things, like what if I did this, or what if this had turned out differently, how would my life be? And I appreciate everyone that shares stories with me. I do have I'm getting geared up for This Is Creepy 4, but these are some bangers. These are some great stories. And I appreciate everyone that has shared. And if you would like to share your story, there's multiple ways you can do it. You have realwarcrypod@gmail.com. There is Yahola Tiger Facebook. You can message me on there. I have more stories from certain people. I didn't want to overload and then me share basically 30 stories from somebody, or have a conversation. But one thing I love when people message me is I always ask them what their favorite, and then we get into certain conversations, and they start telling me things of like, oh, this happened, over here, and this was weird. And so I appreciate everyone that I have those conversations with, and sometimes it's I kind of get not like hard for me to reply, but sometimes I just get busy in my life, and I get to, I can't get to you, but I appreciate those people that reach out. And so, without further ado, guys, this is Creepy Part 3, and I hope you guys enjoyed it. You guys can find me on Facebook, Yahola Tiger. Message me, let me know which episode you like. Share it out to all the family members, everybody. if you got a story, like I said, share it. But you can find TikTok Warcry Pod, on Instagram Warcry Pod, on Twitter One Man Band 918. I'll have a link with everything. All you gotta do is hit the link, and then you can pick whatever. YouTube, we got over 200 followers or subscribers. Keep following, keep liking, get me in the algorithms. I'm trying to in the process of planning more interviews, and so I'll be I'm reaching out to people about interviews, or just a conversation and talking about things. But I really appreciate everyone that listens to the podcast. We are almost at 10,000. That is, to me, is the most outrageous thing about this whole thing, is that we are almost at 10,000 audio listens. And so let's get there. Share it out. Let's get there. Let's crush that goal. Let's get to 20,000, 30,000. I think, as I was kind of doing my research, I don't think there's really a lot of conspiracy, things that we talk about. The next episode we're going to talk about is another mysterious true crime disappearance here in Oklahoma. And then, like I said, I have a few of those coming up. And then also we're going to get into the YT4 series, where I'm going to talk about, my life and just kind of, the steps of how, I've really got to the point of having all these stories and experiencing things that some people deem as crazy. But like I said, guys, I appreciate you guys listening, and I'll catch you on the next one.